You know what? Right now, at this very moment, there are millions of people waking up feeling overwhelmed, they're stressed, they're anxious, they're drowning in their to-do lists, they go to bed exhausted and wake up tired. They're constantly putting out fires, reacting to everything that comes their way, and wondering why they never feel fulfilled even when they're working harder than they've ever worked before. Does this sound familiar? Because I'm telling you right now, if you're feeling this way, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to change it. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. I'm going to give you a system that will transform the way you approach every single day of your life. A system that doesn't just help you manage stress, it eliminates it at the source. See, most people think stress comes from having too much to do, but that's not true. Stress doesn't come from being busy. Stress comes from feeling like you have no control. It comes from feeling like you're being pulled in 1,000 different directions with no clear purpose, no clear plan, and no clear priorities. You're running on someone else's agenda, not your own. And that's why you feel drained, frustrated, and empty at the end of the day. But what if I told you there's a different way? What if I told you that you could work less, accomplish more, and feel absolutely energized and fulfilled every single day? What if you could wake up excited about your day instead of dreading it? What if you could end your day feeling proud instead of guilty? Well, that's exactly what the RPM system does. And I'm going to break it down for you right now in a way that will change everything. Now, before we get into the mechanics, I need you to understand something fundamental. The reason most productivity systems fail is because they focus on the wrong thing. They focus on activities. They give you a list of tasks, and they tell you to check them off, get this done, get that, done, move faster, work harder. But here's the problem with that approach. You can check off every single item on your to-do list and still feel unfulfilled. You can be incredibly busy and incredibly unproductive at the same time. You can work 18 hours a day and accomplish nothing that truly matters. Why? Because you're focused on the what instead of the why. You're focused on action instead of results. You're focused on being busy instead of being effective. And that's the trap that keeps people stuck in stress forever. They think if they just work harder, if they just do more, if they just push through, eventually they'll feel better. But it doesn't work that way. You can't out-hustle a lack of clarity. You can't outwork a lack of purpose. And you definitely can't eliminate stress by adding more to your plate. So what's the answer? The answer is RPM. And RPM stands for Results-Focused, Purpose-Driven, Massive Action Plan. Now, I know that might sound like just another acronym, just another system, just another thing to learn, but trust me when I tell you this. This is not just another productivity hack. This is a complete shift in how you think about your life, your time, and what really matters. This is about taking back control. This is about living intentionally instead of reactionally. This is about designing your life instead of just surviving it. Let me break down what each of these letters means and why they're so powerful. First, the R stands for results, not activities, not tasks, results. See, most people organize their lives around a to-do list. They write down all the things they need to do, and then they spend their day trying to get through that list. Make phone calls, send emails, go to meetings, run errands, pay bills, fix problems. And you know what happens? They get to the end of the day, they're exhausted, and they look at their list and realize they only got through half of it. Or worse, they got through the whole thing and they don't feel any different. They don't feel accomplished. They don't feel fulfilled. They just feel tired. Why? Because they were focused on activities instead of results. They were focused on doing instead of achieving. And there's a massive difference between those two things. Activities are just actions. Results are outcomes. Activities are what you do. Results are what you get. And if you're not clear on what results you're trying to create, you'll stay busy forever without ever making real progress. So the first shift you need to make is this. Stop organizing your life around tasks and start organizing it around results. Every single day, before you do anything else, ask yourself, what are the results I want to create today? Not what do I need to do, but what do I want to accomplish? What outcomes do I want to produce? What do I want to be different by the end of today? For example, instead of writing make phone calls on your list, write secure 3 new clients. Instead of writing work on presentation, write create a presentation that inspires my team and gets them excited about this project. Instead of writing spend time with kids, right? Create a memory with my kids where they feel loved and valued. Do you see the difference? One is focused on activity. The other is focused on results. One is vague. The other is specific. One can be done without making any real difference. The other creates something meaningful. When you focus on results, everything changes. Suddenly, you have clarity, you have direction, you have a target, and when you have a target, you can aim. When you have a destination, you can create a path. When you know what you're trying to accomplish, you can make smart decisions about how to spend your time and energy. But here's where it gets even more powerful. Results alone aren't enough, because you could achieve a result and still feel empty if that result doesn't connect to something meaningful. And that's where the P comes in. The P stands for purpose. This is the why behind your results. This is the reason you want to achieve what you want to achieve. This is the emotional drive that fuels your actions. And this is the most important part of the system, because purpose is what gives you energy. Purpose is what gives you motivation. Purpose is what makes the work worthwhile. See, here's what most people don't understand. Stress doesn't just come from having too much to do. Stress comes from doing things that don't matter to you. It comes from spending your days working on other people's agendas instead of your own. It comes from feeling like you're running on a treadmill, working hard but going nowhere. And the reason that happens is because you've lost touch with your purpose. Think about it. When you're doing something you truly care about, something that matters to you, you don't feel stressed, you feel energized, you feel alive. You could work for hours and it doesn't feel like work. You could face challenges and setbacks and you keep going because you know why you're doing it. The purpose pulls you forward. But when you're doing things without a clear purpose, everything feels heavy. Everything feels like a burden. You procrastinate because you don't have a compelling reason to take action. You get distracted because you don't have a strong enough why to keep you focused. You feel overwhelmed because you're trying to do a million things without any sense of what really matters. So here's what you need to do. For every result you want to create, you need to connect it to a purpose. You need to ask yourself, why do I want this? What will achieving this result give me? How will it make me feel? What will it mean for my life, my relationships, my future? And you need to dig past the surface level answers. You need to get to the emotional core of why this matters. For example, let's say one of your results is to secure 3 new clients. Okay, but why? Why do you want that? Maybe it's because you want to grow your business. Okay, but why do you want to grow your business? Maybe it's because you want financial freedom. Okay, but why do you want financial freedom? Maybe it's because you want to provide a better life for your family. You want to give your kids opportunities you never had. You want to take care of your parents. You want to have the freedom to travel and experience the world without worrying about money. Now you're getting somewhere. Now you have a purpose that's emotionally compelling. Or let's say one of your results is to create a memory with your kids where they feel loved and valued. Why do you want that? Maybe it's because you remember feeling neglected as a child and you never want your kids to feel that way. Maybe it's because you know these years are fleeting and you don't want to look back with regret. Maybe it's because you want your kids to grow up knowing they were your priority, not an afterthought. That's purpose. That's the emotional fuel that will drive you to follow through even when you're tired, even when work is demanding, even when it would be easier to just zone out in front of the TV. When you connect your results to a purpose, you create an unstoppable force within yourself. You give yourself a reason that's bigger than the obstacles. You create meaning that makes the effort worthwhile. And that's when stress disappears. Because stress is what happens when you're working hard without knowing why. But when you have a clear purpose, work becomes fulfilling, effort becomes meaningful. Challenges become opportunities instead of threats. Now, here's the third piece. The M stands for massive action plan. This is where you figure out how you're going to achieve your results. This is your strategy, your plan, your roadmap. But notice what comes first. First, you get clear on your results. Then you connect to your purpose. And only then do you create your action plan. That order matters. Because if you start with actions without knowing your results and your purpose, you're just busy. But when you start with results and purpose, your actions become powerful and focused. Now, when I say massive action plan, I don't mean you need to work 24 hours a day. I don't mean you need to do 100 things. Massive doesn't mean more. Massive means effective. It means leveraged. It means you're taking the actions that will actually move the needle instead of just keeping you busy. See, most people's to-do lists are full of low-impact activities. They're doing a lot of things that don't really matter. They're checking email 50 times a day. They're attending meetings that could have been an email. They're working on projects that don't align with their goals. They're reacting to every little distraction that comes their way. And at the end of the day, they wonder why they're exhausted but haven't made any real progress. But when you have a clear result and a strong purpose, you can be strategic about your actions. You can ask yourself, what are the few key actions that will actually create this result? What are the highest leverage activities I could do? What would make everything else easier or unnecessary? And then you focus on those things and let go of everything else. This is where the magic happens. This is where you stop being a slave to your to-do list and start being the master of your time. Instead of trying to do everything, you do the right things. Instead of reacting to whatever comes your way, you proactively create what you want. Instead of feeling scattered and overwhelmed, you feel focused and powerful. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. Let's say you're in sales and you want to grow your income. Most people would approach this by just working harder. They'd make more calls, send more emails, work longer hours. They'd stay busy all day, but they wouldn't necessarily get better results. They'd burn out trying to do more. But if you use the RPM system, you'd approach it completely differently. First, you define your result. Instead of just work on sales, you'd say, close 5 new deals this month. That's specific, that's measurable, that's a result. Then you'd connect to your purpose. Why do you want to close 5 new deals? Maybe it's because you want to hit your income target so you can take your family on that vacation you've been planning. Maybe it's because you want to prove to yourself that you can perform at this level. Maybe it's because you want to create financial security so you can stop worrying about money. Whatever it is, you connect to that emotional driver. You visualize what it will feel like to achieve that result. You remind yourself why it matters. Then, and only then, do you create your massive action plan. And here's where you get strategic. You don't just say make more calls. You ask yourself, what are the highest leverage activities I could do to close 5 deals? Maybe it's focusing on your warmest leads instead of chasing cold prospects. Maybe it's creating a compelling presentation that addresses your client's biggest pain points. Maybe it's partnering with someone who already has the relationships you need. Maybe it's improving your follow-up process because you realize that's where most deals are lost. Do you see how different this is? Instead of just working harder, you're working smarter. Instead of being scattered, you're focused. Instead of feeling stressed about all the things you should be doing, you're confident because you know exactly what actions will create your desired result. And here's what happens. When you live this way consistently, you start to feel in control again. You stop feeling like life is happening to you and start feeling like you're creating your life. You stop waking up anxious about all the things you need to do and start waking up excited about what you're going to create. You stop ending your day feeling guilty and start ending it feeling proud. But it gets even better than that. When you use the RPM system, you don't just reduce stress, you increase fulfillment. Because you're not just getting things done, you're achieving meaningful results, you're living in alignment with your values, you're making progress on what truly matters to you, and that creates a completely different emotional experience. Think about the difference between these 2 days. In day 1, you wake up and look at your to-do list. It's overwhelming. 30 things on there. And you don't even want to do half of them. You start working through it, but you keep getting interrupted. Emails keep coming in. People keep asking you for things. Problems keep popping up. You're busy all day, putting out fires, reacting to everything. At the end of the day, you're exhausted. You maybe got through half your list. You feel behind. You feel stressed. You feel like you failed. Now, day 2, you wake up, and before you look at anything else, you ask yourself, what results do I want to create today? You get clear. Maybe it's 3 results. Close that big deal. Create quality time with your partner. Make progress on that project you're excited about. Then you connect to your purpose. You remind yourself why these results matter. You feel the emotional pull. Then you identify the key actions that will create these results. Just a few actions. High impact actions. You block time for them. You protect that time. You execute. At the end of the day, you achieve what you set out to achieve. You feel accomplished. You feel fulfilled. You feel energized, not drained. Which day would you rather live? Which day creates stress and which day eliminates it? The difference isn't how much you did, The difference is that one day was reactive and the other was proactive. One day was scattered and the other was focused. One day was about tasks and the other was about results and purpose. Now, I want to address something that might be coming up for you. You might be thinking, this sounds great, but I don't have control over my day. I have a boss who gives me assignments. I have clients who need things. I have family responsibilities. I can't just decide what results I want to create and ignore everything else. And I get it. I understand that you have responsibilities. I understand that there are demands on your time. But here's what you need to understand. Using the RPM system doesn't mean you ignore your responsibilities. It means you organize them in a way that serves you instead of drains you. It means you take ownership of how you approach your obligations instead of being a victim to them. Let me explain. Even if you have a boss giving you assignments, you can still apply RPM. Instead of just looking at the task they gave you, you can ask, what result is my boss really looking for? What outcome do they want? And then you can connect to a purpose. Maybe your purpose is to do such excellent work that you get promoted. Maybe your purpose is to prove to yourself that you can perform at a high level under pressure. Maybe your purpose is to contribute to your team's success because you care about the people you work with. Whatever it is, you can find a purpose that makes the work meaningful to you. And then you can create a massive action plan that's strategic. Instead of just doing exactly what your boss said and the way they said it, you can think about the most effective way to create that result. Maybe there's a faster way. Maybe there's a better way. Maybe there's a way that also develops your skills or builds relationships or creates opportunities for you. When you approach it with this mindset, suddenly you're not just following orders, you're a professional who's creating results. And that shift changes everything. The same goes for family responsibilities. If you need to take care of your kids, you can still use RPM. Instead of just thinking, I have to watch the kids today, you can define a result. I want to create a fun, memorable day where my kids feel loved and we bond. And you connect to your purpose. I'm doing this because these years are precious and I want my kids to have a happy childhood full of good memories. And then you create a plan. We're going to go to the park. We're going to build something together. We're going to have a special dinner. Now, instead of feeling like childcare is a burden, you feel like you're creating something valuable. Instead of feeling stressed about all the other things you could be doing, you feel present and fulfilled. This is the power of RPM. It doesn't require you to change your circumstances. It requires you to change how you think about and approach your circumstances. It gives you back your power. It gives you back your control. And that's what eliminates stress. Now, let me give you the practical steps to implement this starting today, because I don't want this to just be an inspiring idea. I want this to be something you actually use to transform your life. Step 1, every single day before you do anything else, take 10 minutes to define your results for the day, not your tasks, your results. What do you want to accomplish? What outcomes do you want to create? Write down 3 to 5 results, not 20, not 10, 3 to 5. These are your priorities. These are the things that, if you accomplish them, will make today a successful day. Step 2, for each result, connect to your purpose. Write down why you want to achieve this result. What will it give you? How will it make you feel? What does it mean for your life? Get emotional about it. This isn't an intellectual exercise. This is about connecting to what drives you at a core level. Step 3, for each result, identify the key actions that will create it. Not every possible action, the key actions, the highest leverage activities, the things that will actually move the needle. Write down 3 to 5 actions per result. That's it. Now you have a focused, purposeful, powerful plan for your day. Step 4, block time on your calendar for these actions. Treat them like important appointments that you can't miss. Protect this time. Don't let emails, phone calls, or other people's emergencies steal this time. This is your time to create your results. Step 5, execute. Do the actions you planned. Stay focused. When distractions come up, and they will ask yourself, will this help me create my results for today? If the answer is no, say no to it. Be ruthless about protecting your focus. Step 6, at the end of the day, review. Did you create the results you wanted? If yes, celebrate. Acknowledge yourself. Feel good about what you accomplished. If no, ask yourself what got in the way and what you can do differently tomorrow. But don't beat yourself up. Just learn and adjust. That's it. That's the system. It's simple, but it's powerful. And if you do this consistently, it will transform your life. You'll feel less stressed, more focused, more fulfilled, and more in control. You'll stop reacting to life and start creating it. You'll stop being busy and start being effective. You'll stop feeling overwhelmed and start feeling empowered. But here's the thing. Knowing this information isn't enough. You've got to use it. You've got to apply it. You've got to make it a habit, because the difference between people who succeed and people who stay stuck isn't knowledge. It's action. It's commitment. It's follow through. So many people learn systems like this and they get excited. They say, yes, this is exactly what I need. And then they go back to their old habits. They go back to their to-do lists. They go back to reacting to everything. They go back to feeling stressed and overwhelmed. And then they wonder why nothing changed. Don't be that person. Be the person who takes what they learn and actually implements it. Be the person who commits to doing this every single day for the next 30 days. Because I promise you, if you use this system consistently for 30 days, your life will be different. You'll have more energy. You'll have more clarity. You'll have more results. And you'll have dramatically less stress. Now, I want to talk about something else that's critical to ending stress for good. And that's learning to say no. Because even with the best system in the world, if you say yes to everything, you'll still be overwhelmed. If you let other people dictate your priorities, you'll still feel stressed. If you try to please everyone, you'll end up pleasing no one, including yourself. One of the biggest sources of stress in people's lives is overcommitment. They say yes to things they don't want to do. They take on responsibilities they don't have time for. They agree to help people when they're already drowning. And they do this because they're afraid. They're afraid of disappointing people. They're afraid of missing out. They're afraid of being seen as selfish or unhelpful. But here's what you need to understand. Every time you say yes to something that doesn't align with your results and your purpose, you're saying no to something that does. Every time you give your time and energy to something that doesn't matter to you, you're taking it away from something that does. You can't do everything. You can't be everything to everyone. And trying to do that is a recipe for stress, burnout, and resentment. So you've got to get comfortable with saying no. You've got to get clear on your priorities and protect them fiercely. You've got to stop worrying so much about what other people think and start honoring what you know is right for you. Now, I'm not saying you should never help anyone. I'm not saying you should be selfish or inconsiderate. What I'm saying is that you need to be intentional about where you give your time and energy. You need to make sure that you're taking care of your own priorities first so that you have the energy and resources to help others from a place of abundance instead of depletion. Think about it like this. If you're on an airplane and the oxygen masks drop, what are you supposed to do? Put on your own mask first, right? Not because you don't care about the people around you, but because you can't help anyone else if you're passed out. The same principle applies to your life. You got to take care of yourself first. You got to create the results you need to create. You got to honor your purpose. And then from that place of strength and fulfillment, you can be there for others in a much more powerful way. So practice saying no. Practice saying, I appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm not available for that right now. Practice saying, that sounds interesting, but it's not aligned with my priorities at the moment. Practice saying, I need to focus on some other things right now, but I'd love to support you in a different way. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to be harsh, but you do have to be clear and firm. And here's what will happen when you start doing this. At first, it might feel uncomfortable. Some people might be disappointed. Some people might not understand. But over time, something amazing will happen. You'll have more time, you'll have more energy, you'll have more focus, and the people who really matter, the people who respect you and want the best for you will understand. They'll support you. They'll admire you for having clear boundaries and honoring your priorities. Now, there's another piece to ending stress that we need to talk about, and that's the stories you tell yourself. Because stress isn't just about what's happening in your life. It's about what you're telling yourself about what's happening in your life. It's about the meaning you're giving to events. It's about the perspective you're taking. Let me give you an example. Two people can have the exact same experience and have completely different emotional responses. One person loses their job and they're devastated. They feel like a failure. They're stressed and anxious about the future. Another person loses their job and they see it as an opportunity. They feel excited about the possibility of finding something better. They're energized by the chance to reinvent themselves. Same event, different story, different emotion, different result. Or think about traffic. You're sitting in traffic and you've got somewhere to be. One person sits there getting more and more angry, pounding the steering wheel, feeling their blood pressure rise, completely stressed out. Another person sits there calmly, puts on a podcast they enjoy, uses the time to relax and think, arrives at their destination feeling fine. Same situation, different story, different experience. The point is this: stress isn't caused by events. Stress is caused by the meaning you give to events. And the good news is you get to choose that meaning. You get to choose the story you tell yourself. You get to choose your perspective. So when something happens that could stress you out, stop and ask yourself, what else could this mean? What's the opportunity here? What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? What would I tell a friend who is going through this? Most of the time, the things we stress about aren't actually that big of a deal. We make them big deals in our minds by telling ourselves catastrophic stories. We think if this doesn't work out, it's going to be a disaster. Or if I fail at this, everyone will think I'm incompetent. Or if I don't get this done, terrible things will happen. But are those stories true? Usually not. Usually, even if things don't go perfectly, it's going to be okay. You'll figure it out. You'll survive. You'll adapt. You've handled tough situations before, and you'll handle them again. So stop scaring yourself with worst case scenarios. Stop living in fear of what might happen. Stop giving your power away to circumstances you can't control. Instead, focus on what you can control. Focus on your response. Focus on your actions. Focus on your perspective. This is where the RPM system becomes even more powerful because it keeps you focused on what you can control. You can control what results you want to create. You can control your purpose. You can control your actions. You might not be able to control the outcome perfectly every time, but you can control your effort, your attitude, and your commitment. And when you focus on those things, stress dissolves. Let me tell you something else that's crucial. You've got to take care of your body if you want to eliminate stress, because stress isn't just mental, it's physical. When you're stressed, your body goes into fight or flight mode. Your heart rate increases. Your muscles tense up. Your breathing becomes shallow. Stress hormones flood your system. And if you stay in that state for too long, it takes a toll on your health. But here's the good news. You can interrupt that stress response by taking care of your physical state. When you move your body, when you breathe deeply, when you take care of your nutrition, when you get enough sleep, you change your biochemistry. You calm your nervous system. You give yourself the physical foundation to handle challenges without falling apart. Think about it. When you're exhausted, everything feels harder. When you're running on caffeine and sugar, your emotions are all over the place. When you haven't moved your body in days, you feel sluggish and heavy, and all of that makes stress worse. But when you're well rested, when you're eating food that nourishes you, when you're moving your body regularly, everything changes. You have more resilience, you have more clarity, you have more energy, you can handle challenges that would have crushed you before. So make your physical state a priority. This isn't optional. This is essential. You can't operate at your best if you're running on empty. You can't create the life you want if you're destroying your health in the process. And here's what I want you to understand. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's strategic. It's necessary. It's the foundation for everything else. When you're healthy and energized, you show up better for everyone in your life. You're a better partner. You're a better parent. You're a better employee or entrepreneur. You're a better friend. You have more to give because you're operating from a place of abundance instead of depletion. So commit to moving your body every single day, even if it's just a 20-minute walk. Commit to eating food that gives you energy instead of crashes you. Commit to getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep as often as possible. Commit to drinking enough water. These things sound simple, but they're powerful. They change your state, and your state determines your experience of life. Now, let's talk about the long-term vision, because that's another key piece of ending stress for good. When you don't have a clear vision for where you're going, every decision feels stressful. You second-guess yourself constantly. You wonder if you're on the right path. You compare yourself to other people and feel like you're falling behind. You feel scattered because you don't have a clear direction. But when you have a compelling vision for your future, when you know where you're going and why everything gets easier, decisions become clearer because you can ask yourself, does this move me toward my vision or away from it? Setbacks become less devastating because you know they're just temporary obstacles on the path to where you're going. Other people's opinions matter less because you're clear on your own path. So take some time to get clear on your vision, not just for the next week or the next month, but for the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years. What do you want your life to look like? What do you want to accomplish? What kind of person do you want to become? What legacy do you want to create? And don't just think about career and money. Think about your relationships. Think about your health. Think about your personal growth. Think about your contribution to others. Think about the experiences you want to have. Think about the impact you want to make. Create a vision that's so compelling, so exciting, so meaningful that it pulls you forward even when things get tough. When you have that vision, you can use your RPM system every day to move toward it. Every result you create, every purpose you connect to, every action you take, it all becomes part of the bigger picture. You're not just getting through the day, you're building the life you want. And that sense of progress, that sense of purpose, that sense of direction, it eliminates stress at the core. Let me share something with you that's really important. Stress often comes from focusing on what you don't want instead of what you do want. People spend so much mental energy worrying about what might go wrong, what they want to avoid, what they're afraid of, and that focus on the negative creates more stress. But when you shift your focus to what you do want, when you get clear on your vision and your results and your purpose, everything changes. Your brain starts looking for opportunities instead of threats. Your energy shifts from fear to excitement. Your actions become proactive instead of defensive. And stress naturally decreases because you're moving towards something instead of running away from something. This is one of the most powerful shifts you can make. Stop focusing on what you don't want. Stop worrying about all the things that could go wrong. Instead, get crystal clear on what you do want and focus all your energy on creating that. Use your RPM system to define those results, connect to that purpose, and take massive action toward it. Now, I want to address one more thing that causes stress for so many people, and that's perfectionism. The need to do everything perfectly, the fear of making mistakes, the belief that anything less than perfect isn't good enough. This mindset creates incredible stress because perfection is impossible. You'll never reach it. You'll always fall short. And that constant feeling of falling short creates anxiety, stress, and frustration. So you've got to let go of perfectionism. You've got to embrace progress over perfection. You've got to understand that making mistakes is part of growth. You've got to give yourself permission to be human, to mess up, to learn as you go. The people who accomplish the most aren't the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who make mistakes faster than everyone else. They try things, they learn, they adjust, they try again. They don't wait until they have everything figured out. They don't wait until conditions are perfect. They take action, they get feedback, they improve. That's the path to real progress. That's the path to real fulfillment. And it's so much less stressful than trying to be perfect all the time. So give yourself grace, be kind to yourself, celebrate your efforts, not just your outcomes. Acknowledge that you're doing your best with what you have right now. And trust that if you keep showing up, keep taking action, keep learning and growing, you'll get where you want to go. Look, here's the bottom line. Stress isn't an unavoidable part of life. It's a signal. It's feedback that something needs to change. And usually what needs to change isn't your circumstances. It's how you're thinking about and approaching your circumstances. The RPM system gives you a framework for that change. It helps you shift from being reactive to being proactive, from being scattered to being focused, from being busy to being effective, from feeling stressed to feeling fulfilled. But you've got to commit to it. You've got to use it consistently. You've got to make it a part of how you operate every single day. And when you do that, when you commit to living this way, stress doesn't just decrease, it disappears. Because you're no longer at the mercy of your circumstances. You're no longer overwhelmed by your to-do list. You're no longer wondering if you're doing enough or if you're on the right path. Instead, you're clear, you're focused, you're purposeful, you're creating the results you want, you're living in alignment with your values, you're making progress toward your vision, and that creates a sense of fulfillment and peace that no amount of busyness can ever provide. So make the decision right now. Decide that you're done with stress. Decide that you're ready to take back control of your life. Decide that you're going to use this system starting today, not tomorrow, not next week, today. Take out a piece of paper right now and write down 3 results you want to create today. Write down why they matter. Write down the key actions you'll...
You see, the great cosmic joke is that everyone is trying to arrive somewhere they've never actually left. Isn't that strange? The whole of our modern life is built on this curious illusion that there's a point in the future just around the corner where life will finally begin. We imagine it when we get the right job, or find the right person, or earn enough, or meditate long enough, or become spiritually awake enough. But as a matter of fact, the thing we're searching for is the thing that's already happening right now. Let me put it this way. You can't become what you already are, any more than a wave can become water. It is water. The search itself is the disguise, the game of pretending to be lost so that we can enjoy the adventure of finding ourselves again. Now then, most people don't see this because they've been trained since birth to think of life as a journey, in a straight road from A to B, from ignorance to wisdom, from sin to salvation, from childhood to success. But the funny thing about a journey like that is it always keeps the present moment just slightly out of reach, always something to strive toward, always a horizon to chase. And so you end up running on a treadmill that never moves. You know, I once compared time to the grooves on a record. The needle runs along, playing the melody of existence, but every note is happening now. The past isn't something behind you. It's a memory echoing in this very instant. The future isn't somewhere ahead. It's an idea shimmering in your imagination. There is, in truth, only this continuous, eternal now. But the human mind, the tricky fellow that it is, wants to grasp this moment and make it last. It wants to freeze it like a photograph, to say, there it is, I've got it. And the moment it tries, it slips through its fingers. You see, the present isn't a thing you can hold. It's more like a song you can only hear by letting it move. Try to stop it, and it disappears. Now, here's the real mischief. The more you chase the future, the more it runs away. It's like trying to catch your own shadow. The faster you go, the further it flees. And so you become haunted by this feeling of incompleteness, this vague anxiety that something is missing, that you are missing. But let me ask you something. Who is it exactly that's missing? What is this you that's supposed to arrive? The mind creates an image, a better version of yourself, more peaceful, more enlightened, more in control. And that image becomes your God. You kneel before it in silent worship, forever praying to become what you already are. Isn't it funny? The more we seek awakening, the more we affirm our own sleep. Because seeking implies that the thing we want is somewhere else. Yet awakening is precisely the seeing that there's nowhere else to go. You can't wake up later. Now then, imagine a cat sitting in the sun. It's not thinking, if I just purr hard enough, I'll finally become a proper cat. It doesn't strive to be, it is. And that's why it's so effortlessly itself. Whereas we, with all our cleverness, are forever running in circles around our own being, mistaking movement for progress. You've already arrived, but you don't believe it, because it doesn't feel like arrival. You were expecting fireworks, a certificate from the universe, some cosmic pat on the back saying, congratulations, you made it. But instead, there's just this quiet hum of existence, this breath, this moment. And because we've been conditioned to believe that ordinary life is somehow unspiritual, we overlook it. We chase transcendence, all the while trampling the sacred ground beneath our own feet. The birds outside your window, the sound of your breathing, the simple act of being, this is it. Not preparation for it. It. You see, reality is not a path. It's a dance floor. And the point of dancing is not to arrive somewhere, but to move, to express, to play. But we've forgotten how to play because we've taken the whole thing much too seriously. We think existence is an exam we might fail instead of a performance we're meant to enjoy. Now then, the question is not how to reach enlightenment, but how to notice that you are never separate from it. Now then, most people ask, if I've already arrived, why doesn't it feel that way? Well, you see, that's because feeling is a kind of echo. The mind is always a few seconds behind the music. You notice happiness after it's happened. You recognize clarity once the clouds have already passed. In other words, you're always looking at life in the rear-view mirror, wondering why the road seems to move while you stay still. But what if the whole trick of life is that you are the road, that everything you've ever been chasing peace, purpose, love, awakening has never been ahead or behind, but simply here, wearing the disguise of the ordinary. The reason only a few ever glimpse this is because the rest are busy trying to understand it. The intellect, clever as it is, keeps chewing on the words like a dog with a bone, thinking that meaning is something you swallow rather than something you notice. You see, awakening isn't an achievement. It's the collapse of the one who thought he had to achieve it. Let me put it this way. A fish doesn't need to understand the ocean to swim, and you don't need to understand the present moment to live in it. But the moment you try to explain it, you step outside it, just slightly, like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. Isn't it funny how we do that? We keep asking, what's the purpose of life, as though life were a riddle to be solved, when in fact, it's the solver who's the riddle. Life has no purpose apart from living, just as music has no destination apart from being played. If the meaning of a song were only in its final note, you'd never listen to the melody. You'd rush through it to get to the end. And that's precisely what most of us are doing with our lives. We hurry, we strive, we accumulate, not because we need more, but because we're terrified of stopping. Stillness feels like death to the ego. Yet, it's in stillness that the self begins to dissolve into something infinitely larger. Like a drop of water returning to the ocean, it doesn't lose itself, it realizes itself. Now, the odd thing about awakening is that it's often mistaken for despair in the beginning, because when the walls of illusion start to crumble, you see how much of your life was built on make-believe. The stories, the roles, the endless performing, gone. And at first, that feels like loss. You think, my God, I'm disappearing. But what's actually vanishing is the mask, not the face behind it. You know, people say they want enlightenment, but what they really mean is they want to feel good all the time. But awakening isn't about feeling good, it's about seeing clearly. And once you see clearly, even your sadness becomes sacred. You stop dividing the world into good and bad, spiritual and unspiritual, success and failure. You see it all as one magnificent play, sometimes tragic, sometimes comic, but always whole. And here's the curious paradox. When you stop running from discomfort, it begins to soften. When you stop trying to fix the moment begins to breathe again. Because resistance is what makes life feel hard. The river doesn't struggle to flow, it only struggles when it meets the dam we've built across it. The dam of judgment, expectation, and fear. So, when I say, you've already arrived, I'm not inviting you to complacency. I'm inviting you to intimacy with this very breath, this sound, this fleeting second that will never happen again, to see that this right now is the miracle. The awakening is not in some future paradise. It's in this cup of tea, this heartbeat, this quiet awareness listening to my words. There's nothing missing. There never was. Now then, when you begin to see this, really see it, something inside relaxes for the first time. You stop trying to hold your breath in eternity. You begin to trust that life is carrying you, even when you don't know where. That's what I mean by arrival. It's not a destination, it's a surrender. You see, the reason so few people awaken is not because it's difficult, but because it's too simple. The mind is always looking for something complicated to do, some mountain to climb, some riddle to solve, and when it's told that the truth is already here, it refuses to believe it. It's as if someone spent years searching for their glasses, only to discover they've been on their nose the whole time. And isn't that funny? You can't see what's seeing. You can't stand apart from awareness to catch it. You are it. Awareness can never be grasped because it's doing the grasping. So the whole pursuit of awakening, all the striving, the techniques, the comparisons, that's the dream trying to wake itself up. It's perfectly fine as a game, you understand, but it's only a game. Because what you truly are doesn't need improvement, just recognition. Now, people often say to me, but if I stop striving, won't I become lazy, passive, indifferent? Not at all. You see, when action springs from understanding rather than ambition, it becomes graceful. It's like the way a tree grows or a river flows, without effort, without anxiety. The doing happens naturally once the doer stops interfering. When you know you've already arrived, you no longer chase experience like a collector chasing butterflies. You stop pinning the moment to the wall. You simply let it flutter, alive and free. And ironically, that's when joy returns, because joy was never lost. It was just smothered under all the trying. You begin to notice small things again. The pattern of light through the window, the taste of morning air, the laughter of a stranger on the street. You're no longer measuring them against what they should be. You're simply seeing, and that's awakening, not fireworks in the sky, but the quiet recognition that even the most ordinary instant is sacred beyond words. Now then, this realization doesn't make you special. It makes you real, because the one who thought he was special, the one chasing awakening like a trophy, dissolves. And what's left is just life, breathing itself, perfectly at ease. Now then, when you finally stop trying to arrive, you begin to notice that everything has already arrived. The clouds are moving without effort. The trees are swaying without purpose, and your heart beats without your permission. You realize that life doesn't need your supervision. It's astonishingly self-sufficient. Isn't it funny? We humans are the only creatures who think the universe can't manage without our advice. We worry about becoming enlightened, as though existence had made a terrible mistake by not consulting us first. But the stars aren't worrying, the rivers aren't worrying, even your breath, that subtle tide of in and out, goes on perfectly without you doing a thing. And this is the final irony. The moment you stop chasing awakening catches you. It was never hiding. You were simply running too fast to notice. It stands behind every breath, beneath every thought, whispering, "Welcome home." Now, what happens when you live from that realization? You stop acting out of fear. You stop performing life and start participating in it. You become spontaneous again, like a child building sandcastles, knowing the tide will come, but building anyway because play itself is the reward. You stop demanding guarantees. You stop trying to outsmart impermanence. You begin to trust the rhythm of things, the arising and the falling, the blooming and the fading. Let me put it this way. The wave doesn't cling to the sea foam and say, "Stay." It rises, dances, collapses. And in that collapse, it finds its return. That's what you are. The universe playing at being a person disappearing into its own laughter. When you understand this, and I mean really understand it, a strange peace enters the heart. You no longer need to control everything. You no longer measure your worth in victories or awakenings or moments of clarity. You see that even confusion has its place in the dance. You begin to love the whole performance, the good, the bad, the absurd, because it's all one act. And so the invitation is simple. Stop waiting for the grand finale. Stop postponing your existence for a future version of yourself.
There are moments in life that seem to shimmer differently from all the others. You meet someone, and for reasons that defy logic, the air between you feels charged with something ancient. The conversation flows as if it has always been happening. The silences are full instead of awkward, and their presence feels less like discovery and more like remembrance. You can't quite explain it, but you know it. You know them, though you have never met. It isn't about attraction in the usual sense. It isn't even about similarity. It's something deeper, quieter, a kind of recognition that bypasses thought. You feel it in the way your body relaxes around them, the way your mind stops performing. In their gaze, you don't feel judged, but seen, not admired, but known. Most people mistake this feeling for romance, for destiny, for the long-awaited other half. But what you are really experiencing is the universe recognizing itself through two of its expressions. When two awakened souls meet, what passes between them is not ownership, but awareness. You see, Awakening strips away the masks that most people wear. It dissolves the stories we tell ourselves about who we should be and how others should perceive us. And when those stories are gone, what's left is naked, being simple, luminous consciousness. So when two beings who are awake to that truth meet, they see not personas, but presence. The illusion of separation flickers and, for a moment, disappears. It's not that you fall in love, it's that love falls into you. Awakened connection is not built through effort. It happens by resonance. Just as two tuning forks vibrate together when one is struck, two beings who are attuned to life's depth naturally harmonize. They don't complete each other, they reveal each other. Each becomes a mirror in which the other can see what is already whole. The ego doesn't know what to do with this kind of meeting. It tries to name it, to contain it, to turn it into a narrative. It calls it fate or twin flame or cosmic purpose. But the truth is simpler and more mysterious than that. When you stand before another and feel that inexplicable recognition, you are witnessing consciousness remembering itself. There's a story I like to tell. A wave once looked across the ocean and saw another wave approaching. "You look familiar," it said. "Perhaps we've met before." The other wave laughed and said, "Of course we have. We've never been apart." That is what happens when two awakened souls meet. They see through the forms and remember the sea. At first, the experience can feel overwhelming. You may feel a rush of emotion, a sense of intensity that your mind can't label. That's because awareness, when reflected, amplifies itself. The presence of another conscious being draws forth what is dormant in you. You begin to see parts of yourself you had forgotten: tenderness, vulnerability, peace. This can be beautiful, but also unsettling. The ego fears transparency. It prefers the safety of roles and masks. When faced with someone who sees beyond them, it trembles. That trembling isn't a warning, it's a purification. It's life asking, are you willing to be seen completely? If you are, something miraculous unfolds. The boundaries soften, not in the sense of merging, but in the sense of openness. You realize that real intimacy is not about becoming one person. It's about realizing you were never two. That's the paradox of awakened connection. It deepens individuality while dissolving separation. Each person remains distinct, yet both recognize the same awareness behind the distinction. It's like two mirrors reflecting each other into infinity, endless, spacious, and free. In such presence, words become unnecessary. Conversation still happens, but it carries a different weight. Silence speaks louder than language. The need to impress fades. You start to listen, not to reply, but to hear the universe speaking through both of you. There's no desire to hold or keep the other, because what you value isn't their form, but their being. You see that even if the body's part, the awareness you share is continuous. That's why these connections, once experienced, never truly end. The people may move away, the story may change, but the recognition remains imprinted in consciousness. And so you begin to understand that what the universe brings together, it doesn't always keep together in form. It doesn't promise permanence, only truth. The purpose of meeting an awakened soul is not to possess them, but to remember who you are through them. When you grasp that, the anxiety of attachment dissolves. You no longer need to define the relationship, to protect it, to make it fit an image. You let it be what it is, a sacred intersection in the vast unfolding of being. Sometimes that intersection lasts a lifetime. Sometimes it lasts a moment. But in eternity, the length doesn't matter. 1 second of true recognition outweighs years of polite familiarity. And even if you never meet again, the meeting has already fulfilled its purpose. It has shown you the face of awareness in another form. It has reminded you that love in its highest expression, is not about merging or clinging. It's about seeing clearly and allowing freely. You begin to notice that this recognition can happen anywhere, with a stranger on a train, a child, an animal, even a fleeting encounter that leaves no trace. It's the same universe winking at itself, saying, "I'm still here." In that realization, loneliness dissolves. You see that the awakened soul is not a rare being hidden somewhere in the world. Every person is that soul, sleeping or stirring, waiting for the right moment to open their eyes. And when they do, the meeting happens again, not between two people, but within the vastness that contains them both. When awareness meets awareness, something changes in the air. You can feel it, even if you can't explain it. There's a softness, as though time slows down just enough for eternity to peek through. You stop thinking about who you are supposed to be and simply exist as you are. It's not dramatic. It's not mystical fireworks. It's more like coming home to a place you never knew you'd left. And that homecoming doesn't depend on the other person. They may have sparked it, but what they really did was remind you of yourself. You begin to see that all love, in its deepest sense, is self-recognition. Not the small self that worries and strives, but the vast awareness that has always been quietly watching. When you love someone who is awake, you're really loving the presence that both of you share. This kind of meeting doesn't follow the usual human script. There are no guarantees, no promises to fulfill, no expectations to satisfy. You don't meet to complete each other, you meet to reflect each other. The relationship, whatever form it takes, becomes a sacred mirror. You start to see where you still cling, where you still hide, where you still confuse attachment for love. Sometimes that reflection can be uncomfortable. The other person may stir up parts of you that you thought were resolved. That's because awareness, by its nature, illuminates. When two awakened souls meet, every shadow is invited to surface, not for judgment, but for integration. It's like two candles placed near each other. Their flames grow brighter, and the darkness has no choice but to retreat. And yet, in that brightness, there is gentleness. True recognition doesn't demand, it doesn't need to control or claim, it simply allows. You can feel the difference. Possession feels heavy, while awareness feels weightless. When you look into the eyes of someone who truly sees you, there's no hunger in their gaze. There's space, the kind of space that lets you breathe freely, that invites you to be exactly as you are. You start to understand why the universe arranges such meetings. It's not to give you a perfect companion or to fix your loneliness. It's to remind you of the unity behind all appearances. Through the reflection of another, you remember that everything you seek has always been within you. That realization is both humbling and liberating. Because once you see it, you can never unsee it. The world starts to glow differently. Every encounter becomes an echo of that recognition. You begin to sense the sacred in everyone, even those who are still asleep to their own light. You look at them and think, "Ah, there you are, just not awake yet." And you realize how patient the universe really is. It allows every soul to awaken in its own time, through its own experiences. Some awaken through beauty, some through heartbreak, some through silence. But the destination is always the same, the rediscovery of being. When you understand that, love ceases to be personal, it expands. You no longer love people for who they are to you. You love them for what they are in truth, expressions of the same consciousness wearing different masks. The boundaries blur, and compassion becomes effortless. You stop needing to be understood, and instead, you start to understand. That's the strange and beautiful thing about awakening. It doesn't make you special. It makes you ordinary, but in the most miraculous way. You no longer stand apart from the world. You blend with it. You taste the oneness that mystics and poets have always tried to describe. And yet, you can still enjoy the play of individuality. You still laugh, cry, fall in love, and lose things. You still feel the human heartbeat, but now it pulses in rhythm with everything else. When you meet another awakened soul, that rhythm harmonizes for a while, like two notes in perfect tune, and when they part, the song continues in a different key. It's not about holding on, it's about listening. Listening to the music of connection without demanding it play forever. Some meetings are a single verse, others are an entire symphony. Both are complete, both are sacred. The universe has a peculiar way of arranging such encounters. You don't plan them, you don't predict them, and you certainly don't control them. They happen in the same way that flowers bloom or waves rise spontaneously, without permission. And just as naturally, they fade when the time is right. If you can accept that rhythm, you'll never feel abandoned. You'll understand that the universe doesn't take people away, it changes the form of the connection. The awareness you share remains untouched, like light passing through different windows. The glass changes, the light does not. And so, when two awakened souls meet, there's no need to grasp, no need to mourn, no need to define. You simply recognize the miracle, bow to it, and let it flow. That recognition is enough to transform your whole understanding of relationship. You see, that awakening isn't just a solitary journey, it's relational. Every meeting, every reflection, every exchange of energy is part of the unfolding. And through these reflections, awareness deepens its understanding of itself. Even separation in this light becomes sacred, because the moment you stop clinging, you start to perceive the subtle thread that connects all things. You realize that love never leaves, it only changes its language. So when you meet someone and feel that quiet recognition, don't rush to label it. Don't trap it in words like soulmate or destiny. Just be still and let it reveal its lesson. The universe is using that person as a mirror to show you your own depth. And when the reflection fades, thank it, bow to it, because it has done what it came to do, to remind you that awareness is never alone. That's the secret. The universe doesn't bring two awakened souls together to make them one. It brings them together so they can see that they always were. There is a quiet humor in the way the universe arranges things. It hides itself in countless forms, pretending not to know what it is. And then, every so often, two of those forms look at each other and remember. That remembrance is not dramatic. It's subtle, like sunlight finally reaching a corner of the room that's been in shadow all morning. You don't say, "Ah, the light has come." You simply notice that everything looks clearer. When two awakened souls meet, that clarity deepens. Each becomes a mirror in which the other can see the movement of awareness itself. The mirror does not add anything, it only reflects what is already there. But in the reflection, the mystery becomes visible. You begin to sense that what you call me and what you call you are two ripples on the same sea, two ways the universe is tasting its own existence. The mind resists this at first. It likes definitions. It wants to say, you are over there and I am over here, and our connection must mean something specific. But awareness smiles at the mind's confusion. It knows that what appears as two is actually one, playing hide and seek. The very act of seeking each other is how consciousness enjoys its own diversity. Think of a mirror facing another mirror. Between them, reflections multiply into infinity. No single image can claim to be the original, yet each one contains the same light. When you look into the eyes of another awakened being, you are seeing that infinity, an endless play of forms, revealing the same source. This realization changes the flavor of love. It becomes less like hunger and more like recognition. You don't reach out to take, you relax into seeing. Love stops being an effort and turns into awareness resting in itself. You no longer say, I love you as possession, but as observation. I see the same light moving there. And when you see that light clearly, judgment dissolves. The need to compare, to demand, to shape others into your image fades. How could you insist that another wave be higher or lower than yours when you both rise from the same ocean? Compassion becomes natural, not as a moral virtue, but as a direct understanding. The suffering of another is no longer foreign. It is your own reflection asking to be understood. Awakened relationship, then, is not about agreement or shared beliefs. It's about shared seeing. You could disagree entirely on politics, taste, or temperament, yet still feel the deep resonance that comes from recognizing the same ground of being. Beneath all the movement of personality, there is a stillness you both inhabit. When you rest there together, even silence becomes a conversation. That silence teaches you something that words cannot. Presence is enough. You realize that most of your interactions in life were attempts to fill silence because silence felt empty. But when awareness meets awareness, silence feels full. You could sit beside each other for hours, saying nothing, and still feel complete. It's as though time pauses to listen. People often ask, how do I find someone awakened? But that very question hides the answer. You cannot find awareness outside yourself. You can only recognize it. And recognition happens naturally when you're no longer seeking completion. When you stop demanding the world to fill your emptiness, you discover that everyone you meet becomes a potential reflection. The awakened companion may not appear as you imagine. They might be a stranger on a bus, a child, a teacher, or even a brief passerby. But the essence of the meeting is always the same: awareness glimpsing itself. Such meetings are gifts, not possessions. They are reminders, and like all reminders, they vanish once their purpose is fulfilled. To cling to them is to lose the lesson they carried. The universe will sometimes bring someone into your life only long enough for you to remember what you already are. When that memory settles, the person may drift away, and that is not a loss, it's a completion. Of course, the heart still aches when form departs. Even the awakened heart feels grief. But awareness transforms grief into gratitude. You begin to thank existence for lending you another mirror, even for a moment. You see that love is never wasted, because love was never between two. It was the movement of the one appearing as two. And so, the mirror of awareness does its work quietly. It shows you where you are still hiding. It reveals the subtle clinging to identity, the small fears that whisper, I must hold on. But when you look closely, you see that even those fears are part of the dance. The mirror reflects everything, not only light but shadow, because both belong to wholeness. There will be times when another awakened soul challenges you, not through argument, but through presence. Their stillness might unsettle you. Their acceptance might disarm you. That is the mirror at work. Awareness is showing you the places where you still contract, where you still resist being seen. Let those reflections soften you instead of frighten you. The more completely you allow yourself to be seen, the freer you become. Over time, you notice that the need for particular mirrors fades. You no longer wait for the universe to bring you someone special because you've discovered that the mirror was never external. The world itself becomes your companion. Every sound, every face, every gust of wind reflects the same consciousness back to you. Life becomes an ongoing conversation between the infinite and itself. And in that realization, the old idea of loneliness loses its grip. You may live alone, you may walk through a crowded city, but you are never isolated. The same awareness that once met you through another now meets you through everything. The raindrop on the window, the laughter of a stranger, the breath moving in your chest, all of it whispers the same message. I am here I am you, I have always been. When you live from that space, relationships transform. You don't enter them out of need, but out of joy. You meet others not to complete yourself, but to celebrate the shared being that already is complete. You can love fully without fear, because you know that even if form changes, the essence remains untouched. The mirror cannot break. It can only change what it reflects. This understanding also brings humility. You realize that awakening doesn't make you better than anyone else. It simply makes you transparent. You become a clear window through which life shines unobstructed. And when another soul looks through that window, they might recognize their own clarity. In that sense, awakening is contagious not because you teach it, but because you are it. Sometimes the universe arranges two such transparent beings to cross paths for a while. Their presence amplifies each other, creating a small field of peace that ripples outward. You can feel this when you're near them, a calm that doesn't need explanation. They don't preach, they simply exist, and their existence changes the atmosphere. But the universe is playful. It doesn't allow stagnation, even in enlightenment. Eventually, those paths diverge again. The mirrors move apart, and each continues, reflecting the infinite in new ways. And that, too, is perfect. When you understand this, you stop asking, will it last? Because you see that it already has. Every true meeting is eternal in its essence. The form may dissolve, but the awareness that recognized itself through that meeting never fades. In dreams, in memory, in subtle intuition, the resonance continues. It's the universe reminding you, nothing real can be lost. So, what happens when the universe brings two awakened souls together? Nothing and everything. On the surface, perhaps two people share a conversation, a walk, a moment of laughter. Beneath the surface, the infinite meets itself and smiles. The smile is enough. You might not even realize until later that something inside you shifted. The world feels lighter, your heart more spacious, your mind less defensive. That is how the mirror works quietly, without drama. It doesn't change what you are, it reveals it. And once revealed, you can never return to pretending. You may forget for a time, you may get caught again in stories and striving, but somewhere inside, the remembrance remains. Every future meeting, every glimpse of beauty, will echo that first recognition, I am the one I was seeking. Eventually, you stop distinguishing between spiritual and ordinary encounters. The sacred seeps into everything. The cashier's smile, the rhythm of rain, the breath between thoughts, all mirrors, all teachers. The universe never stopped bringing awareness together. You just stopped noticing. Now you see that the entire cosmos is an endless conversation between awakened souls, each reflecting the same light through different eyes. So, when another comes into your life and you feel that spark of familiarity, treat it as a blessing, not a mission. Don't rush to label it. Don't demand that it stay. Simply bow inwardly and say, ah, there you are again. Then let life decide how long the dance will last. Because the meeting itself is the message. To see yourself reflected so clearly, even for an instant, is to remember eternity. And in that remembrance, all seeking ends. You realize that there were never two awakened souls, only one awareness, meeting itself in infinite forms, smiling through countless eyes. There comes a peculiar moment in one's life when joy simply vanishes. Not suddenly, like a door slamming shut, but gradually, like a room dimming without anyone touching the lights. You look around and everything is technically the same. The people you used to laugh with are still there. The hobbies you loved still exist. The world has not changed its shape. And yet, you feel as though something essential has slipped quietly out of your hands. You wake up and the day feels flat, You sit among things that used to spark curiosity, and nothing happens. You listen to music that once made your chest bloom with feeling, and it now passes through you like wind through an empty house. Conversations feel muffled. Activities feel distant. Even happiness feels like a memory someone else once told you. You begin to wonder, what's wrong with me? Why does nothing bring me joy anymore? This is perhaps one of the most frightening questions a human being can face, because it touches the deepest fear of all, the fear that something in you has broken. But what if the opposite is true? What if nothing brings you joy because something in you is finally working? You see, joy is not something you manufacture. It is something that arises naturally when you are aligned with your own life. It comes uninvited, like a bird singing on your windowsill. You don't have to force it, and you certainly don't have to chase it. Joy is the fragrance of a life lived from the center of oneself. So, when joy disappears, it is not because you have failed. It is because something in you is shifting. Something is dissolving. Something is releasing its grip. There is a phase of awakening that no one likes to talk about. A phase where the colors of life fade, the meaning drains out of your ambitions, and the things you once depended on for emotional nourishment no longer satisfy you. You feel empty, unmoved, disconnected, as though the world has stepped away from you. But what has really happened is that you have stepped away from the world you created before you understood yourself. The numbness you feel is not the death of joy. It is the death of stimulation, the death of distraction, the death of an identity that was built to cope, to perform, to impress, to survive. You cannot find joy because you are no longer resonating with the version of yourself that used to seek it. Now, this stage feels terribly confusing. You may think you are depressed, or apathetic, or emotionally dull, but numbness is not a malfunction. Numbness is a signal. It means your inner system is shutting down outdated pathways. It is refusing to sustain the old narrative. It is pulling you inward, away from noise and toward truth. Imagine you are holding a cup filled with muddy water. The more you swirl it, the murkier it becomes. But if you allow it to become still, the sediment sinks. Clarity emerges from quiet, not from motion. In the same way, your joy sinks when life is asking you to be still, not because joy is gone, but because clarity needs space to surface. The absence of emotion is not the beginning of despair. It is the beginning of purification. You see, the universe is remarkably intelligent, far more intelligent than the thinking mind. And when the life you have been living no longer matches the truth of who you are becoming, the universe does a very gentle thing. It withdraws your excitement for that life. It takes away your enthusiasm, your craving, your emotional reward system, not to punish you, but to guide you toward a larger horizon. You cannot stay in old rooms once your soul has outgrown them. But because humans fear stillness, you interpret this withdrawal as a problem. You chase joy harder, only to feel it slip further through your hands. You try to recreate old pleasures, revive old habits, repeat old patterns. But joy does not return, and the more you force, the more exhausted you become. You begin to ask, why can't I feel anything? But stillness is not nothingness. It is information. It is your inner being saying, you must stop now. You must listen. You must see what is really happening. The collapse of joy is the first sign that the old you is dissolving. The identity you built to survive your childhood, or to satisfy society, or to earn validation, or to keep yourself safe, its time has run out. And the dissolution of an identity always feels like the dissolution of feeling, because for a moment, you do not know who you are supposed to be. You are no longer the person you once were, but not yet the person you are becoming. This in-between space is emotionally quiet. And in the quiet, joy hides. Not because joy has left, but because it belongs to the self you are growing into, not the self you are shedding. Now, some people try to escape this phase. They try to feel something, anything, through distraction. They seek stimulation, drama, high highs, low lows, anything to convince themselves they are still alive. They fear the quiet because the quiet feels like emptiness. But emptiness is misunderstood. Emptiness is not the absence of life. It is the clearing of space for life to enter. It is the moment the soil is turned before new seeds are planted. You cannot grow anything on ground that is cluttered with old roots. So life uproots you. It empties you of old joy so that new joy can take root. This process is not comfortable, but it is necessary because the joy you used to feel was not deep enough. It was joy based on external stimulation, joy based on identity, joy that depended on circumstances going your way, joy that could be taken from you. Life wants something more stable for you, something deeper, something that comes from within rather than from the world. And so it takes away the old joy, so you can discover a joy that rises from presence, not performance. And this transition is always prefaced by numbness. Before the heart can feel more, it must feel less. Before consciousness expands, it withdraws from the surface of things. Before the self awakens, it sleeps. This is why nothing brings you joy, because the part of you that used to chase joy is dissolving, and the part of you that will experience real joy has not yet fully awakened. Imagine a caterpillar. Before it becomes a butterfly, there is a moment when it is neither one nor the other. It dissolves entirely into a kind of living soup, a formless in-between. If it were capable of emotion, it might say, "Nothing feels meaningful anymore. I don't know what I am. I feel like nothing." But the caterpillar is not dying. It is reorganizing. You are reorganizing. The numbness is your cocoon. The emptiness is your metamorphosis. You are not losing joy. You are losing the version of yourself that required the world to provide it. And here is something even more subtle. The universe often removes joy when you have been living on borrowed energy, when you have been pushing yourself, ignoring yourself, betraying yourself in small ways, when you have been moving too fast for too long, when your nervous system is exhausted beyond what you can consciously admit. Sometimes nothing brings you joy because your body is simply tired, tired of enduring, tired of pretending, tired of performing optimism, tired of carrying the weight of expectations and emotional obligations, tired of trying to survive without rest. And so joy shuts down, not as a failure, but as protection. Your system cannot run on empty forever. It forces stillness when you refuse to give it willingly. This is why joylessness feels like being underwater. The world is muted because you are being asked to rest. You are being asked to face the quiet truth of your own exhaustion. Now, the mind resists this fiercely. It says, "I shouldn't feel this way. I should be excited. I should be productive. I should be grateful." But the universe is not interested in your shoulds. It is only interested in your truth. And truth often arrives disguised as stillness, because only in stillness can you finally hear what your life has been trying to tell you. When joy collapses, meaning begins to loosen. The things that once held your identity together no longer feel solid. You begin to question who you are, what you want, what you believe, and why you have lived the way you have lived. This questioning is not a crisis. It is clarity. It is the beginning of authenticity. To awaken is to feel the collapse of borrowed meaning, the collapse of external joy, the collapse of the old self. To awaken is to pass through numbness on the way to truth. And here is the great paradox. Joy disappears because you are finally ready to feel real joy, not the joy of excitement, but the joy of being, not the joy of pleasure, but the joy of presence. Not the joy of escape, but the joy of awareness. Real joy does not rise quickly. It rises slowly, like a tide. It rises from quiet, and before it rises, the shoreline must be cleared. This clearing is happening now. You are not broken. You are being prepared. You are not emotionally dead. You are emotionally resetting. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding yourself. The reason nothing brings you joy is because the old you can no longer be satisfied with the world that once comforted it. Your sensitivity is changing. Your awareness is deepening. Your soul is taking the steering wheel from your persona. And personas do not surrender joyfully. So the universe removes joy. It removes stimulation. It removes old meaning. It removes everything you used to lean on. And in that removal, you begin to stand on the ground of yourself for the first time. There is a point, usually after the numbness has lingered longer than you thought you could endure, when something almost imperceptible begins to shift. It does not arrive loudly. It does not announce itself with fireworks or dramatic emotion. It comes in the smallest way, so subtle that you nearly miss it. A moment where your breath feels slightly deeper. A moment where the world looks a touch less flat. A moment where a sound or a glimpse of light stirs something faint in your chest. It is not joy itself, but the space joy will return to. You see, before joy can return, the place inside you that receives joy has to be rebuilt. The old structure collapsed with your old identity, and you cannot feel joy through an identity that is dissolving. Joy cannot enter a house that is being rebuilt. The foundation must be cleared, the walls must be undone, the windows must be opened. This is the work that numbness does. Numbness is the renovation of the inner world. And once the renovation reaches a certain point, you begin to feel again. Not fully, not dramatically, but honestly. This is the first sign that you have entered the second phase of awakening. The phase where your emotional life begins to reorganize itself around presence rather than identity. You begin to sense that beneath the quiet, something is alive, something is breathing, something is waiting for you to slow down enough to notice it. You may wake up one morning and find that the silence feels less like emptiness and more like spaciousness. You may look at the sky and feel a faint recognition of beauty, not because the sky changed, but because your capacity to perceive it is returning. You may sit with yourself and feel a softness that was unavailable to you before. This is how the new joy approaches. Not as excitement, but as gentleness. Not as a high, but as a deepening. Joy begins to return as presence. Presence is the ability to inhabit your own life without the filter of expectation or fear. It is the ability to feel without interpreting, without managing, without controlling. Presence is the purest form of awareness. It is the ground of all real joy. Now, at first, this presence can feel unfamiliar. You are used to emotion arriving in waves, in highs and lows, in bursts of enthusiasm or disappointment. But presence brings a different flavor of experience. It is quieter, steadier, more patient. It does not intoxicate. It does not overwhelm. It simply reveals. And so joy shuts down, not as a failure, but as protection. Your system cannot run on empty forever. It forces stillness when you refuse to give it willingly. This is why joylessness feels like being underwater. The world is muted because you are being asked to rest. You are being asked to face the quiet truth of your own exhaustion. Now, the mind resists this fiercely. It says, I shouldn't feel this way. I should be excited. I should be productive. I should be grateful. But the universe is not interested in your shoulds. It is only interested in your truth. And truth often arrives disguised as stillness, because only in stillness can you finally hear what your life has been trying to tell you. When joy collapses, meaning begins to loosen. The things that once held your identity together no longer feel solid. You begin to question who you are, what you want, what you believe, and why you have lived the way you have lived. This questioning is not a crisis. It is clarity. It is the beginning of authenticity. To awaken is to feel the collapse of borrowed meaning, the collapse of external joy, the collapse of the old self. To awaken is to pass through numbness on the way to truth. And here is the great paradox. Joy disappears because you are finally ready to feel real joy, not the joy of excitement, but the joy of being, not the joy of pleasure, but the joy of presence, not the joy of escape, but the joy of awareness. Real joy does not rise quickly. It rises slowly, like a tide. It rises from quiet, and before it rises, the shoreline must be cleared. This clearing is happening now. You are not broken. You are being prepared. You are not emotionally dead. You are emotionally resetting. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding yourself. The reason nothing brings you joy is because the old you can no longer be satisfied with the world that once comforted it. Your sensitivity is changing. Your awareness is deepening. Your soul is taking the steering wheel from your persona. And personas do not surrender joyfully. So the universe removes joy. It removes stimulation. It removes old meaning. It removes everything you used to lean on. And in that removal, you begin to stand on the ground of yourself for the first time. There is a point, usually after the numbness has lingered longer than you thought you could endure, when something almost imperceptible begins to shift. It does not arrive loudly. It does not announce itself with fireworks or dramatic emotion. It comes in the smallest way, so subtle that you nearly miss it. A moment where your breath feels slightly deeper. A moment where the world looks a touch less flat. A moment where a sound or a glimpse of light stirs something faint in your chest. It is not joy itself, but the space joy will return to. You see, before joy can return, the place inside you that receives joy has to be rebuilt. The old structure collapsed with your old identity, and you cannot feel joy through an identity that is dissolving. Joy cannot enter a house that is being rebuilt. The foundation must be cleared, the walls must be undone, the windows must be opened. This is the work that numbness does. Numbness is the renovation of the inner world. And once the renovation reaches a certain point, you begin to feel again. Not fully, not dramatically, but honestly. This is the first sign that you have entered the second phase of awakening. The phase where your emotional life begins to reorganize itself around presence rather than identity. You begin to sense that beneath the quiet, something is alive, something is breathing, something is waiting for you to slow down enough to notice it. You may wake up one morning and find that the silence feels less like emptiness and more like spaciousness. You may look at the sky and feel a faint recognition of beauty, not because the sky changed, but because your capacity to perceive it is returning. You may sit with yourself and feel a softness that was unavailable to you before. This is how the new joy approaches. Not as excitement, but as gentleness. Not as a high, but as a deepening. Joy begins to return as presence. Presence is the ability to inhabit your own life without the filter of expectation or fear. It is the ability to feel without interpreting, without managing, without controlling. Presence is the purest form of awareness. It is the ground of all real joy. Now, at first, this presence can feel unfamiliar. You are used to emotion arriving in waves, in highs and lows, in bursts of enthusiasm or disappointment. But presence brings a different flavor of experience. It is quieter, steadier, more patient. It does not intoxicate. It does not overwhelm. It simply reveals. You begin to see that joy was never lost. It was simply waiting for you to return. The return of joy is the return of truth. the return of alignment, the return of the part of you that was buried beneath effort and identity. It does not matter how long you have been numb. It does not matter how deeply you believe something was wrong with you. Life has been reorganizing you in the dark, preparing you, softening you, bringing you to a place where joy can be recognized again, not as a burst of emotion, but as the quiet radiance of being awake. You see, joylessness is not the opposite of joy. It is the purification of joy. It is the space where old meanings dissolve so new ones can emerge. It is the silence before the deeper life begins. And now you stand at the threshold of that deeper life, a life in which you do not chase feeling, but allow feeling, a life where you do not grasp at joy, but recognize joy in everything, a life where you understand that joy is not something you find, but something you become. Because when the old you falls away, and the noise dissolves, and the numbness clears, you discover something astonishing. Joy was never in the world. It was always in your awareness of the world, and now that awareness is being restored. Not as it was before, but as something new, something deeper, something clearer, something truer. What returns now is not excitement. What returns now is not stimulation. What returns now is the simple miracle of being alive. This is the joy that cannot be taken from you. This is the joy that arises when you stop chasing and begin listening. This is the joy that emerges when you finally meet your life without resistance. This is the joy that was waiting for you in the silence. And now, because you have passed through the numbness, because you have been emptied, because you have surrendered the old identity, you can finally feel what was here all along. A joy that does not shout, a joy that does not vanish, a joy that does not depend on anything, a joy that simply is. This is the return. This is the rebirth. This is the beginning of a life lived from the center of yourself. And this is where joy begins. Every moment spent chasing becomes a moment unseen, unlived, unappreciated. But when you realize that this very moment, this breath, this heartbeat, is the only enough that ever existed, something inside you softens. You no longer fight the flow. You start to dance with it. The meaning of money is in its movement. It is not meant to be hoarded, but circulated. It is energy in motion. And when you let it move, it brings life. When you freeze it, it begins to die. The same is true for joy, for love, for creativity. These things only remain alive when shared. That is why generosity has always been the mark of a truly wealthy spirit. Because generosity is not about giving away money. It is about releasing attachment. It is saying, I trust life enough to let this go. And the universe, being an echo of that same trust, often responds in kind. Real wealth does not come from possessing more, but from needing less. You become infinitely rich the moment you stop trying to compensate for your sense of lack. You realize that all this time, you were never chasing money, you were chasing yourself. You were searching for the feeling of being enough. And the moment you recognize that you already are, the chase ends. This does not mean you abandon ambition or stop working. It simply means you stop confusing effort with worth. You work not to become something, but to express what you already are. That shift, subtle as it seems, transforms everything. Suddenly, your actions feel lighter. You stop competing and start creating. You stop worrying about outcomes because you understand that what truly matters was never at stake. The real purpose of money is play, to facilitate exchange, creativity, and connection, not to define identity. When you begin to treat it as play, you participate in the great rhythm of life without losing yourself in it. You can work hard, earn much, even enjoy luxury, but you no longer confuse the mask for the face. Look around the world and you will notice that the happiest people are not necessarily those who have the most, but those who are most alive. They use money like musicians use notes, as a means of expression, not measurement. They can laugh at losses, smile through uncertainty, and still trust the unfolding of things. You may not control every rise and fall of fortune, but you can always control your relationship to it. You can choose to see money as movement rather than meaning. You can choose to treat wealth as a guest rather than a god. The moment you stop believing that happiness lies somewhere beyond the next financial milestone, you begin to wake up. You realize that the true treasure of life is not stored in banks, but in awareness, in the ability to see beauty in what is already here. Imagine living from that space. You still earn, still plan, still invest, but you no longer suffer through it. You no longer chase freedom, you express it. Because the free person is not one who has escaped the system, but one who no longer believes it defines them. Wealth and freedom are not opposites. They only appear that way when you forget who you are. When you remember, everything becomes simple. You earn when you need to, you rest when you can, and you allow life to unfold in its rhythm. And then, quite mysteriously, abundance finds its way back to you. Not because you demanded it, but because you finally stopped blocking it. You stopped clutching at life and started trusting it. The fool chases freedom through control. The wise simply realize that control was never needed. And in that realization, you discover the most profound truth of all. You were never meant to be rich. You were meant to be free. They guide your choices, shape your dreams, and limit your joy. But fear is not truth. It is imagination without awareness. The mind projects its doubts into the future, forgetting that the present moment contains no threat. When you bring awareness back to now, fear dissolves like mist in sunlight. And finally, there is the place of achievement, the grand illusion that you must earn your right to exist. From childhood, you were taught that success is the price of worthiness. You were told that meaning is found in doing more, having more, becoming more, but this endless striving leaves you exhausted and hollow. For every mountain you climb, another appears. Every goal achieved brings only temporary satisfaction before the next desire takes its place. You cannot reach peace through achievement because peace was never missing. It was simply forgotten beneath the noise of becoming. When you live in these places long enough, you begin to forget that they are not who you are. You start to believe that comparison, control, and fear are the normal conditions of life. You even take pride in your suffering, calling it ambition or discipline. But there comes a moment, sometimes in exhaustion, sometimes in silence, when something within you whispers, there must be more than this. That whisper is the beginning of awakening. It is the voice of the true self calling you home. The journey back to your real nature does not begin by running from these places, but by seeing them clearly. Seeing the illusion is already freedom from it. The one who observes comparison is not comparing. The one who sees fear is not afraid. The awareness that witnesses the storm is not the storm itself. This is the essence of awakening. Not to become something new, but to remember what was never lost. As long as you identify with what changes, you will suffer with every change. But when you rest as the awareness behind it, you find a peace that cannot be shaken. The world continues to move. The body continues to age. The stories continue to unfold. Yet there is a stillness that remains untouched. That stillness is your true nature. It is not a belief or a philosophy. It is the very ground of your being. And when you begin to live from that awareness, something extraordinary happens. The comparisons lose their power. The fears lose their grip. The noise of the world softens into background music. You move through life not as someone trying to win, but as someone who has already arrived. You act, but without anxiety. You care, but without attachment. You love, but without possession. This is what it means to remember yourself. Most people will never take that step. They will continue to chase and collect and compare until their final breath. But you, if you are listening closely, may already sense that another way exists. Not a path that you must find, but one that reveals itself when you stop running. The moment you stop trying to become, you return to being. And there, in that simple presence, you rediscover the truth you had been searching for in every corner of the world. Your true self was never hidden. It was only overlooked. Like the silence behind every sound, it was there all along, waiting for you to remember. There comes a time when you grow tired of your own struggle, not because you've given up, but because you've finally seen through the illusion that there was ever something to win. You begin to notice that every chase ends in the same place. Every success fades into the next desire, and every fear eventually dissolves into the air it came from. And in that quiet realization, something begins to awaken. You start to sense that freedom is not a matter of fixing life, but of seeing it clearly. When you see clearly, you no longer need to escape the world. You simply stop mistaking the noise for yourself. The mind will still produce thoughts, emotions will still rise and fall, but the difference is that you no longer identify with them. You begin to live from a deeper stillness, an inner clarity that watches the play of life without being carried away by it. Most people believe awakening is about adding something: more knowledge, more practice, more light, but true awakening is the opposite. It is a gentle undoing, a falling away of everything that is not you. You begin to shed the unnecessary, not through effort, but through recognition. Like mist burned away by the sun, illusion fades the moment it's seen for what it is. You realize that you were never the restless seeker trying to become something more. You were the space in which the seeking was happening. You were the quiet awareness watching the entire performance unfold. Once this begins to dawn in you, the world starts to feel lighter. You no longer walk through life as if it were a battlefield. You move as if life were music, unpredictable, fluid, alive. You begin to understand that harmony was never about control, but about listening. The same way a musician must surrender to the rhythm, you learn to trust the natural movement of your own existence. The mind, of course, will resist this. It will say, if I stop striving, I'll fall behind. If I stop controlling, everything will collapse. But this fear is built on misunderstanding. It assumes that you are the one holding life together. In truth, life is holding you. The same intelligence that turns stars, that breathes your lungs, that beats your heart without your permission, that is what's living you. To fight against it is to struggle against your own nature. When you allow life to flow through you rather than trying to command it, something miraculous happens. Effort becomes grace. Work becomes play. Even pain becomes a form of transformation. You begin to see that everything that once felt like punishment was only life trying to teach you how to let go. The world becomes your mirror. Wherever you look, you see reflections of the self you used to believe you were. But instead of reacting, you begin to smile. You realize that everyone is caught in the same dream, trying to protect the same illusions. And compassion arises not as an obligation, but as a natural understanding. You no longer need to change people. You see that they, too, are being guided home in their own time. There's a beautiful simplicity that returns to your existence. You no longer need grand philosophies or complex practices. Presence itself becomes your teacher. When you drink tea, you taste life in the tea. When you walk, you feel the ground as part of yourself. When you breathe, you realize the air entering your lungs has already belonged to countless others before you. Everything begins to shimmer with the same aliveness that once seemed hidden. You discover that joy was never something to achieve, it was what remained when striving stopped. The same world that once felt chaotic now feels sacred, because you are no longer separate from it. You are not a visitor in this universe. You are the universe momentarily playing the role of a person. Many people spend their whole lives trying to find meaning. They ask, why am I here? But the question itself is the confusion. You are not here to find meaning. You are here to experience being. Meaning is not something given to you by the world. It arises naturally when you are present. When you are fully here, life takes care of itself. You stop living in the past and future because you see how unreal they are. The past is memory, the future is imagination, and neither can ever be touched. The only place life actually exists is now. This moment, simple and ordinary as it may seem, contains everything. All the beauty, all the mystery, all the peace you were searching for has been waiting here all along. When you live from this awareness, even the so-called dangerous places lose their power. Comparison becomes gratitude because you finally see that everyone's path is their own. Control becomes surrender because you trust the intelligence behind every unfolding. Identity becomes play because you know you are not the mask but the one wearing it. Distraction turns into wonder because every sound and sight becomes a reminder of your own presence. Perfection becomes unnecessary because you realize that the world was never broken. Fear turns into curiosity because what once seemed threatening now becomes an invitation to awaken. And achievement becomes expression, a joyful way of participating in life rather than a desperate attempt to justify your existence. When you live like this, there is no conflict between being and doing. You can act in the world without losing yourself in it. You can work, create, build, and care. But your peace no longer depends on results. You are free in success and free in failure because both are seen as passing clouds in the same vast sky of awareness. People sometimes ask, if I stop chasing, won't I lose motivation? But true motivation doesn't come from fear or lack. It comes from love. When you love something, you do it naturally. You don't have to force yourself to create, to explore, to share. Life moves through you as inspiration, not obligation. That is what it means to live freely. And as you rest more deeply in that state, gratitude begins to bloom. You start to see the gift in everything, even in loss, even in uncertainty. Because you realize that life's impermanence is not a problem to be solved, but a miracle to be witnessed. Every ending makes room for another beginning. Every change reminds you that nothing was ever meant to be held forever. In that realization, the world no longer frightens you. You can stand in the middle of chaos and remain still inside. You can watch the rise and fall of fortune and not lose your balance. You can experience pain and not close your heart. This is the strength that arises from awakening, a strength that looks soft to the world but is unbreakable within. When the ego finally quiets, you discover that what remains is love. Not sentimental love, not the love that comes and goes, but the boundless love of awareness itself, the recognition that everything you see, everything you feel, is made of the same essence as you. And when you live from that realization, every encounter becomes sacred. Every person becomes a reflection of yourself. Every breath feels like a prayer. In the end, there is nowhere to go. No goal left to chase. No trap left to escape. You see that the whole journey was a circle leading you back to the present moment. Back to the simple truth that you are, and that is enough. Freedom was never about breaking chains, but about realizing they were never real. And when you finally see that, you smile. You smile because you understand what all the teachers, sages, and poets were trying to tell you. That the self you were trying so hard to find was the one that had been listening all along. You were never lost. You were simply dreaming. And now you are awake. Not long ago, I spoke with a young man. He sat across from me, leaning forward in his chair, fidgeting with his hands, as though still running, even while seated. There was nothing particularly unusual about him. He was not a failure, nor a beggar, nor a saint. He was, in many respects, the kind of man you might pass on the street and not think twice about. He had a decent job, friends who liked him, a family who cared for him. But underneath the surface of his life, there was a deep and gnawing unease. As he spoke, I noticed his eyes kept darting around the room, as though chasing some invisible fly. He told me, "I can't remember the last time I felt present. Even when I sit with my child, laughing, I find myself worrying about bills. Even in bed at night, I'm planning the next week, the next year. I don't feel here. I feel somewhere else." And you see, I told him something I'll tell you as well. His story is not his alone. It belongs to every one of us. In fact, I promised him that I would share it, not because his story is dramatic or unique, but precisely because it is ordinary. It is the common story of human beings in the modern world. But I won't tell you the ending just yet, because the part that matters most can only be understood once we take the journey together. The ending only makes sense if you walk with me through the questions that haunted him, and perhaps haunt you as well. So let us set his story aside for now. Like a bookmark placed in a well-worn book, we will return to it before long. Now, let us ask the question, why is it that the present moment, which is all we ever truly have, feels so difficult to remain in? It should be the most natural thing in the world. After all, where else could you possibly be? You are not in yesterday, except in thought. You are not in tomorrow, except in imagination. In reality, you are here, breathing, listening. Life is unfolding before your very eyes. And yet, for some reason, we resist it. We slip away from now as though it was something dangerous. The young man, when he sat at the dinner table with his child, should have found delight in the simple sound of laughter, the warmth of food, the ordinary blessing of being alive. But instead, his mind buzzed with the unfinished tasks of the day, the upcoming worries of the week, the endless pressure to prepare for a life he had not yet lived. And so it is with us. We live in the present as though it were a waiting room for the future. The mind whispers, not this, something else, something more. Why? Why do we resist what is, in fact, the only reality? It is because the present moment is too real, too raw, too unedited. To be here fully means to face yourself without distraction, to admit that this is your life, not tomorrow, not someday, but now. And that realization frightens us, because if this moment is all there is, then there is no more postponing your happiness. There is no guarantee of another chance. There is only this, and that feels unbearably final. So we run, we hide in memory, we build castles in imagination, we live in a perpetual elsewhere, convinced that one day, when conditions are just right, we will finally arrive. But life does not work that way. Life is always now, never then. The young man told me that whenever he tried to sit still, to meditate, or simply to be, he felt restless, agitated, almost as though something was wrong. He couldn't bear the silence. He couldn't bear the presence of his own mind. So he reached for his phone, or switched on the television, or threw himself into his work, anything to escape the unbearable weight of being here. And perhaps you know that feeling too. Perhaps you have tried to pause, and within seconds your mind fills with worries or regrets, or that peculiar sense that you should be doing something else. We call it boredom, but what it really is fear. Fear of facing ourselves. This is why so much of our culture is built upon distraction, endless entertainment, constant stimulation, a new headline, a new message, a new piece of information to devour. Because in silence, in stillness, the truth of now comes rushing in, and we find it overwhelming. But I want you to notice something subtle. To resist something is already to be in relationship with it. The very fact that you feel restless in the present moment means you are already brushing against it. The discomfort is not proof that you are far away, it is proof that you are close. Like standing at the edge of the ocean, where the waves lap at your feet, the resistance is a sign that the water is near. Now, I must pause here, because I want to say something important. If you have ever felt this restlessness, this inability to stay present, you are not alone. And this is why I speak at all. We are building, slowly, a small circle of people willing to look at these questions together, to admit the difficulty and not run from it. If you feel resonance with this, then you are already part of that circle. The resistance we feel toward the present is not simply personal, it is cultural. From childhood, we are trained to chase. We are taught that life is about progress, about becoming, about achieving. We delay gratification, we set goals, we measure ourselves by the future. And so when someone says, be here now, it feels almost like nonsense. It feels unnatural, because we have been conditioned to believe that the real treasure always lies just over the next hill. But what happens when we actually reach the hill? Have you noticed? The goal achieved, the desire fulfilled, the box ticked, how quickly the satisfaction fades. And once again, the mind says, not this, something more. This is the cycle the young man found himself in. He would complete a project at work, only to feel anxious about the next one. He would save some money, only to feel it was never enough. He would sit with his family, only to feel guilty that he was not planning better for their future. The poor fellow was never here, and so he was never at peace. But there is a hidden gift in this recognition. For the very dissatisfaction you feel with running endlessly forward is itself the beginning of awakening. To notice that you are not here, to see clearly that you are resisting, is already a step closer to presence. It means you have begun to wake from the dream of elsewhere. And so I said to the young man, what you seek is not in the distance, it is not in tomorrow, it is not in the perfection of your plans. It is right here, in the very moment you are running from. He shook his head. Of course, he said he couldn't see it. That is natural. Because the truth of this cannot be given in words. It must be discovered in experience. That is why his story does not end here, for his discovery came later in an unexpected moment, and I will share that with you. But only once we have looked deeper into the nature of this resistance. For unless you understand why we all flee the present, his story will not make sense. So let us keep walking. Let us examine together why humanity, for all its brilliance, has built its entire life upon the illusion of elsewhere. For until we see the root of this madness, we will never be free. Why is it that we resist the present moment with such persistence? It is because the present moment is the one thing we cannot bend to our will. You may alter the memory of the past in your imagination. You may plan for the future and dream of what is to come. But the present arrives uninvited, unpolished, untamed. It comes in its own clothing, and it does not ask your permission. To surrender to it is to admit that you are not in charge, and this, more than anything else, terrifies us. Think again of the young man, the restless one who could not sit still at his dinner table. He wanted, with all his might, to be a good father, a good worker, a decent man. These are noble desires. But beneath them was the hidden demand for control, the quiet belief that if only he did everything right, life would turn out according to plan. So when he sat with his child, he was not present. Because presence admits uncertainty, and uncertainty is unbearable for the mind that seeks control. But here lies the paradox. The only true stability comes from releasing our grip on control. The river cannot be conquered by trying to dam it up. It is far too powerful, too alive. The river teaches you only one way: to float, to let go, to allow yourself to be carried by its current. In the same way, the present moment becomes not frightening, but wondrous when you stop resisting its flow. The young man, in his restless evenings, imagined that if he let go of striving, he would collapse into passivity. He worried that if he stopped planning, he would fail his family. "Won't I lose my drive?" he asked. Perhaps you've asked this yourself. It is a common fear. But you see, when you release the exhausting grip of control, you do not lose energy, you gain it. You stop leaking your life force into endless anxiety. Instead, your actions rise up naturally, like a spring bubbling from the ground. You dance, not because you must, but because you are moved by the music itself. Now, pause for a moment and notice something. You are listening to these words right now. This, in itself, is proof that you can give your attention wholly to one thing. You may already feel, however faintly, that something in this reflection resonates with your own life. And this recognition is important, because when you find yourself saying, "Yes, I know this," you are not just hearing me, you are hearing yourself. That resonance is the thread that ties us together. And you see, that is what this little circle is about. We gather here not as isolated minds, but as a kind of quiet community, reminding one another of what is easily forgotten, that there is no someday, there is only today. But let us return to the man, for his story is the key. One evening, after a long day at work, his mind buzzing with the usual anxieties, he sat down to dinner. His child climbed into his lap, laughing about some small and silly thing, as children do. For a moment, the young man's mind began to slip away, drifting back into bills, into deadlines, into plans. But then something remarkable happened. He caught himself. He saw, with piercing clarity, that he was about to miss this very moment. And instead of letting his mind run, he stayed. He simply stayed. For a few breaths, he allowed himself to drop the resistance. And in those breaths, he felt the warmth of his child against his chest, heard the laughter as though for the first time, smelled the food on the table, saw the ordinary miracle of life unfolding in front of him. And he wept. He wept because he realized that he had been running from this for years. The present had not been absent. It was always here, waiting patiently. The only thing missing was his willingness to arrive. When he told me this later, he said it felt like falling into a river, terrifying at first, but then strangely liberating. He discovered that life did not collapse when he let go of control. In fact, it became fuller, richer, more alive than he had ever known. He discovered that the very thing he had been chasing, peace, contentment, joy, was not in the distance at all. It was in the simple act of being here. And this is where the teaching comes alive. For the resistance you feel toward the present moment is not an enemy, it is a teacher. The restlessness, the agitation, the endless chase, these are not signs that you are broken. They are signs that you are human. They are the invitation to awaken. So I say to you, do not condemn yourself for resisting. Notice it. Hold it gently. Realize that in the very act of noticing, you have already stepped closer to presence. The resistance is like the ringing of a bell, reminding you that now is calling. And here is the secret the young man discovered. Once you begin to allow even a sliver of the present in life, rushes in to meet you. You need not force it. You need only stop running. Now, you might ask, what does it mean to live this way? It does not mean abandoning plans or refusing to care for tomorrow. It means not using tomorrow as an escape from today. You may plant seeds, but you do not live in the harvest. You live in the planting itself. You may dream, but you do not flee into dreams. You root yourself here in the ordinary miracle of breath and laughter and sunlight. And the wonderful thing is that when you do, the future often takes care of itself, because the best preparation for tomorrow is not anxiety today, but presence today. From presence, wise action arises. From presence, you respond to life rather than react to it. The young man learned this slowly, not in one grand epiphany, but in countless small moments. Each time he noticed his mind running away, he gently returned, like a father guiding a child back to the table. And each time, he found that the present was not frightening after all. It was tender. It was alive. And so it is with you. The door back to now is never locked. It does not require years of effort. It requires only the willingness to step through it, again and again, whenever you remember. And perhaps, in this very moment, you can feel it. The weight of the chair beneath you, the rhythm of your breathing, the simple fact of being alive. This is the doorway. And once you notice it, you are already through. Now, before we close, I want to say this. What you and I are doing here is not an isolated act. It is part of something larger. More and more people are beginning to wake from the dream of someday. And in that awakening, we are forming a kind of invisible community, a gathering around the fire of presence. You may not see the others, but you are not alone. We are all here together in this moment. And that, perhaps, is the greatest gift. Because the young man's story is not only his, it is yours, it is mine, it is the story of every human being who has ever wrestled with the restless mind and discovered, at last, the peace of simply being. So let me leave you with this. The ending of his story is not an ending at all. It is a beginning. For every time you choose to arrive in the present, you begin again, and life, in its inexhaustible generosity, will always meet you here. Most of us live under an unspoken law, always be available. It begins early. A child is taught to answer immediately when his name is called. At school, an absent response is punished. In the workplace, we are told to keep our phones nearby, our inboxes open, our minds alert, just in case someone needs us. Availability is rewarded, praised, demanded, and so we grow into adults who confuse availability with goodness. We believe that saying yes makes us virtuous, that answering quickly makes us reliable, that bending ourselves for others makes us lovable. But in truth, constant availability is a kind of prison. A man who is always available to others becomes unavailable to himself. He is present everywhere and yet nowhere. Why do we equate availability with love? Because we are told that self-sacrifice is noble, that to be good is to give, and to give endlessly. And so we say yes. Yes to invitations we do not want. Yes to tasks that drain us. Yes to relationships that hollow us out. Our lives become a collection of other people's needs. We become like actors on a stage, performing roles assigned to us by family, friends, colleagues, strangers. We smile when we are tired. We nod when we disagree. We show up when our spirit longs to rest. But what kind of love is it if it demands that you betray yourself? The man who is always available pays a silent price. He loses the weight of his own presence. When he says yes to everything, his yes means nothing. His attention, scattered everywhere, becomes worthless. His presence, given away freely, becomes invisible. Consider water. When it overflows indiscriminately, flooding every place, it destroys. But when it is directed, when it flows through a channel, it nourishes. It becomes life itself. So too with your availability. Scattered everywhere, it is wasted. Given with discernment, it becomes sacred. And so one day, perhaps without even knowing why, a man decides not to answer. The phone rings, and he lets it ring. A request is made, and he says no. A demand is pressed, and he steps away. In that moment, he feels fear. For he has broken the law of availability. He has dared to say, I am not here for you right now. And immediately, the world reacts. Those who depended on his constant yes grow unsettled. They say, you've changed, you're selfish, you don't care anymore. But what do these accusations truly mean? They mean only this: you are no longer as useful to me as you once were. The shock of this realization cuts deep. He thought his presence was valued for who he was, but now he sees it was often valued for what he could give. When you stop being available, you hold up a mirror to others. You reveal who was with you for your essence and who was with you for your service. True companions remain. They do not vanish when you say no. They respect your boundaries, for they have boundaries of their own. They know that love is not measured in exhaustion, but in truth. False companions fall away. Their affection was never for you, but for your availability. And when your availability ends, so does their loyalty. This clarity is painful, but it is also liberating. For the man who loses false friends gains space for real ones. The first thing you notice when you stop being available is silence. At first, it feels like emptiness. The phone rings less. The requests stop. The invitations grow scarce. You feel abandoned, even punished. You wonder if you made a mistake, but slowly the silence changes. It becomes not emptiness, but presence. For the first time, you hear your own thoughts without interruption. For the first time, you feel the rhythm of your own breath, the pull of your own heart. And you begin to realize being unavailable to the world is not the same as being absent from life. On the contrary, it is the first step toward being truly present. By withdrawing, you become more real. The man who says yes to everything is never fully here. His mind is fractured into 1,000 obligations. His spirit is thin, stretched across the demands of others. He is always present and yet absent. The man who withdraws, who dares to say no, who refuses to be endlessly available, he becomes whole. He is less accessible, but more authentic. He is less frequent, but more meaningful. His presence, though rarer, carries weight. This is why stepping back feels heavy. It is the weight of reality pressing in after years of dispersing yourself into illusions. But the world will not celebrate your withdrawal, for society thrives on availability. Employers want workers who never rest. Friends want companions who never decline. Families want members who never set boundaries. And so, when you withdraw, you become inconvenient. You disrupt the unwritten agreement that says, we will all pretend to be endlessly available so that no one has to face themselves. Your no exposes the lies in their yes. Your silence unsettles their noise. Your absence reveals the shallowness of their presence. And so they resist you. They call you cold, selfish, arrogant. But what they truly mean is, you no longer sacrifice yourself for my comfort. The early stages of withdrawal feel like exile. You walk alone, you question yourself, you wonder if you are becoming bitter, if you are making a mistake, but in truth, you are being initiated into a deeper life. The loneliness is not punishment, but purification. It strips away the crowd so that you may finally hear your own soul. And slowly, solitude reveals itself as something other than emptiness. It becomes a fullness, a companionship with life itself. The stars bear witness to you. The wind becomes your friend. The silence embraces you like an old companion. You begin to see that solitude is not absence of others, but presence of truth. So yes, when you stop being available, You carry a burden. You lose false friends. You face accusations. You endure silence. But this burden is also a gift. For in losing what was false, you gain what is real. In being accused of selfishness, you discover the difference between servitude and love. In embracing silence, you find presence. The weight of constant availability is the heaviest of all, for it is the weight of living for everyone but yourself. The burden of withdrawal is heavy too, but it is the weight of freedom. This is the beginning of the transformation, the first step on the path. The man who stops being available feels the sting of rejection, the ache of solitude, the discomfort of silence. But he also begins to feel something else, the stirring of authenticity, the slow awakening of presence, the whisper of freedom. It is not yet complete. The path is long and the burden still heavy. But the shift has begun, and once it begins, there is no turning back. When a man continues on the path of withdrawing his endless availability, something subtle begins to happen. At first it was only silence and loss, but slowly the silence becomes a sanctuary and the loss becomes a purification. He begins to see that his life was never meant to be a constant answering of demands, but a dance with reality itself. At the beginning he thought that saying no was selfish, but over time he sees that his no is not rejection, it is direction. It is the recognition that his energy is not infinite, and that to give it without care is to diminish its power. By saying no, he is not closing the door on others, he is opening the door to authenticity. And this shift changes everything. When he speaks now, his words carry weight, for they are not spoken out of obligation. When he shows up, his presence is felt more deeply, for it is not scattered across 100 places. His time is no longer an automatic offering, but a deliberate gift. The strange paradox is that by being less available, he becomes more present. Those who still walk with him notice this. They may not always like it, but they feel the difference. When he is there, he is truly there. When he listens, it is with the fullness of his being. When he gives, it is without resentment. And this, he realizes, is what love actually is, not the endless performance of availability, but the offering of one's whole self in truth. There is a certain peace that arises when you stop scattering yourself. You discover that you are no longer running, no longer rushing to keep up with the demands of everyone else's timetable. You learn that time itself begins to feel different when you are not filling it with obligations. Moments stretch, breaths deepen, the pace of life softens. You are no longer carried away by the current of endless yes. You begin to walk at the rhythm of your own soul. This is when the world around you changes. Some people will fade, unable to handle your boundaries. They will complain, accuse, distance themselves. And yet, you notice that others arrive. New companions who respect your space, who are not offended by your no, but grateful for your authenticity. Relationships built on illusion end, but relationships built on truth are born. In these relationships, you find freedom. You do not need to perform. You do not need to exhaust yourself to prove loyalty. You can disappear for a time, and they will not hold it against you. For they too have understood that love is not measured in constant availability, but in honest presence. Withdrawal also awakens a deeper awareness of life itself. When you are no longer always on call, you begin to hear the quieter voices of existence. The rustle of leaves becomes a conversation. The flow of a river becomes a teaching. The stars above you are no longer background decoration, but companions on the path. You realize that by becoming unavailable to the endless noise, you have become available to the eternal song. The irony is almost comic. All those years, you thought you were being good by being available, but in reality, you were absent from the one thing that truly matters, the mystery of being alive. In saying no to the world, you have said yes to life. And this yes cannot be faked. It carries a different vibration. People may not understand why they are drawn to you now, but they feel it. Your presence, no longer cheapened by endless accessibility, has become rare and therefore precious. Of course, there will still be moments of doubt, times when loneliness creeps in, times when the old habit of overgiving tries to return, but you have tasted the difference. You have felt the liberation of boundaries. And once you have seen the value of your own presence, you cannot go back to selling it cheaply. Some will still call you selfish. Some will insist you have grown cold. But within yourself, you know this is not true. You are not less loving, you are more. For your love is no longer diluted by resentment, no longer poisoned by exhaustion. Your love, though rarer, is whole. To live this way is to embrace a kind of nobility, not the nobility of pride or superiority, but the nobility of truth. It is to live without pretense, without performance. It is to know that your worth is not measured by how many demands you can meet, but by how authentically you can stand in the world as yourself. In this realization, life becomes lighter, not easier, for there will always be pressures and expectations, but lighter because you no longer carry the unnecessary weight of pleasing everyone. You carry only what is real, and in that reality, you discover strength. When you stop being available, everything changes. Not only because the world sees you differently, but because you see the world differently. You are no longer trapped in the endless cycle of obligation. You are no longer enslaved to the constant call of others. You have stepped into a deeper rhythm, one that aligns not with the noise of the crowd, but with the music of existence itself. And this, perhaps, is the greatest discovery, that availability, when given wisely, is not a duty but a gift. That your presence, when offered in truth, can touch others more deeply than 1,000 empty gestures. That by protecting your time, you honor the mystery of life. So let the world call you selfish. Let the crowd misunderstand. For in their misunderstanding, you are freed. You are no longer theirs to command. You belong only to life, to truth, to the great unfolding dance of being, and in that belonging, you find peace.